Have you ever stepped outside, felt a sudden chill in the air, and just known that rain was coming? Maybe you glanced up at the sky and noticed the clouds gathering in a certain way. Or perhaps you heard the distant rumble of thunder and felt that ancient, almost instinctual pull, the understanding that the weather was about to change. Long before satellites, weather apps, or even the evening news forecast, people had to rely on something far more intimate: their own connection to the world around them. For generations, farmers didn't just work the land, they listened to it. They observed the subtle whispers of nature, interpreting signs that most of us would overlook today. From the behavior of animals to the color of the sky at sunset, every detail held meaning. This wasn't guesswork. It was a profound, deeply rooted knowledge passed down through centuries, a language of the earth itself. Think about that for a moment. Without a single piece of modern technology, farmers could predict storms, anticipate droughts, and prepare for frost, sometimes days in advance. They noticed how cattle gathered together or birds flew low. They paid attention to the way smoke rose from a chimney or how their own joints ached before a shift in pressure. These weren't just old wives' tales, they were reliable indicators, honed by endless observation and refined by necessity. Survival itself depended on this wisdom. A missed prediction could mean a lost harvest, hardship for a family, or even starvation through a brutal winter. This was a science of attention, a discipline of watching and waiting, of understanding patterns that connected the heavens to the hum of life on the ground. And that's exactly what we're going to explore together today. This is the story of how ordinary people learned to read the world like a book, a skill so intuitive and yet so sophisticated that it feels almost like magic. We'll uncover how your great-grandparents truly knew a storm was approaching without radar or smartphones. We'll decode the meanings behind cloud formations, animal behaviors, and even those subtle physical sensations that hint at shifting weather. By the time we're done, you won't just see the sky, you'll understand it in a completely new light, connected to a tradition of wisdom that transformed survival into an art. This is the lost art of weather prediction, and it's time we brought it back to life. This deep connection to the environment meant that a farmer's entire day, and indeed their livelihood, was structured around interpreting a silent language written in the wind, the clouds, and the behavior of every creature around them. Across the globe, isolated from one another, ancient cultures from the indigenous tribes of North America to the rice farmers of Asia all developed strikingly similar systems of prediction. They didn't have the means to communicate their findings across continents, yet through patient, dedicated observation, they often arrived at the same conclusions about what certain signs meant. This wasn't a coincidence. It was a universal response to the fundamental need to understand the rhythms of the natural world. This accumulated wisdom was far too vital to be left to chance memory. To ensure it endured, this knowledge was woven into the fabric of daily life through rhymes, proverbs, and stories. These weren't just charming bits of folklore. They were mnemonic devices, cleverly crafted to be easily remembered and passed from one generation to the next. Think of the famous rhyme many of us still hear. Red sky at night, sailors delight. Red sky in morning, sailors take warning. This simple couplet is a perfect example of a weather proverb that spans cultures, with versions of it appearing even in the Bible. It's based on solid scientific principle. A red sky at sunset often indicates high-pressure air and stable weather approaching from the west, while a red sky in the morning suggests that this good weather system has already passed, leaving room for stormier low-pressure air to move in. The precision of these sayings is what's so astonishing. They provided specific, actionable forecasts. Another proverb warns, "When leaves show their undersides, be very sure that rain betides." This refers to the way the wind pushes up against the lighter-colored undersides of leaves on trees like poplars and maples before a storm, a phenomenon caused by the changing air pressure associated with an incoming weather front. Or consider the observation about animal behavior. When sheep gather in a huddle, tomorrow will have a puddle. Livestock are highly sensitive to drops in atmospheric pressure. They instinctively group together for shelter when they sense rain is imminent. These were not vague guesses. They were reliable, short-term forecasts built on generations of verified data. Modern science has since caught up to this ancestral intelligence, providing explanations for why these methods work so well. The aching in an elder's bones before a storm, often dismissed as an old wives' tale, is now understood as a response to falling barometric pressure causing expansion in fluid-filled joints. The sharpened sense of smell that allows one to detect rain on the wind is due to the same drop in pressure, which releases scents from the soil and plants. This proves that these ancient predictors were not engaging in superstition. They were the first practical meteorologists, conducting a continuous, multi-generational study of the atmosphere using the most advanced tools they had, their senses and their shared experience. Their legacy is a testament to human ingenuity and our profound, innate connection to the earth. So let's start by looking up, just as they did. The sky was a farmer's most expansive and dynamic forecast map, a vast canvas of ever-changing clues. Before stepping out into the fields, a wise farmer would first spend long moments simply watching the horizon, interpreting the hues of sunrise or the deepening colors of dusk. That famous rhyme, "Red sky at night, sailor's delight," is far more than a simple saying. It's a concise report on atmospheric optics and air pressure. A sunset bathed in brilliant red indicates that the sky to the west, from which our weather typically travels, is clear. This allows the sun's light to pass through a thick layer of atmosphere, scattering the blue light and letting the longer red wavelengths dominate. It signals a high-pressure system is bringing in stable, dry air. Conversely, a fiery red morning sky suggests that this clear air has already passed to the east, and what's coming in from the west are the moisture-rich clouds of a low-pressure system, which scatter the red light forward, a definitive warning of rain. But the analysis went much deeper than just color. The shape, texture, and altitude of clouds formed a detailed vocabulary. High, wispy cirrus clouds, often called mare's tails, were a telltale sign. These delicate streaks of ice crystals are typically the first visible indication of an approaching warm front, often arriving a full 24 to 48 hours before any rain actually falls. Seeing them was a signal to begin preparing. As the system drew closer, these cirrus clouds would thicken and lower into a milky, veil-like layer known as cirrostratus. This is when farmers would look for one of the most reliable signs of all, a halo around the sun or moon. This beautiful ring of light is caused by the refraction of sunlight or moonlight through the countless six-sided ice crystals within these high clouds. The appearance of a halo was a powerful predictor, almost a guarantee, that precipitation would arrive within the next day, as the cloud deck continued to lower and thicken into rain-bearing nimbostratus clouds. The movement and behavior of lower clouds were equally telling. A quickly darkening, boiling sky with rolling cumulonimbus clouds, the anvil-shaped giants of the atmosphere, signaled an imminent and likely violent thunderstorm. The direction of cloud movement was also crucial. Clouds moving in opposite directions at different altitudes indicated significant wind, shear, and turbulent, unpredictable weather ahead. Even the absence of clouds held meaning. Exceptionally clear, deep blue sky in the winter, while beautiful, often foretold a severe drop in temperature overnight, as there were no clouds to act as a blanket trapping the day's warmth. This knowledge of the sky was not passive. It was an active daily interrogation of the heavens. A farmer could stand in a field, feel the wind on their face, and by reading this celestial script, know with remarkable certainty whether to harvest today or to batten down the hatches for a storm tomorrow. And while the sky offered a grand, sweeping forecast, the farmyard itself provided a more intimate and equally reliable weather station, one that was constantly broadcasting signals through the behavior of its inhabitants. Animals possess a sensory perception far beyond our own, an innate ability to detect the subtle shifts in atmospheric pressure, humidity, and electrical charges that precede a change in the weather. For a farmer, their livestock and the local wildlife weren't just assets. They were a living, breathing barometer, and learning to read them was a critical skill. Consider the common cow, a creature so deeply associated with pastoral life. The old adage that cows lying down in a field means rain is coming is far more than a folktale. It's a behavior rooted in instinct. As barometric pressure drops before a storm, the air feels heavier and more dense to these large animals. Lying down is believed to be a way for them to conserve a dry patch of grass, a simple act of claiming their spot before the rain compels the entire herd to stand up and crowd together for warmth. A farmer glancing across the pasture and seeing a herd settled on the ground knew it was time to secure loose items and prepare for wet weather. This sensitivity extended to the skies above the farm. You might have heard that birds flying low means rain is imminent, and the science behind this is remarkably straightforward. Birds are incredibly sensitive to air pressure. In stable, high-pressure conditions, the air is denser, providing more lift and making it easier for them to soar at higher altitudes where insect prey is often abundant. But when a low-pressure system moves in, the air becomes less dense, making sustained flight more energetically costly. The insects they feed on are also pushed lower by the heavier, moisture-laden air, so the birds simply follow their food source down, creating that telltale sign of low-flying swallows or swifts skimming the pond surface. Even the smallest creatures offered valuable intelligence. Observing an anthill could reveal a flurry of frantic activity, with worker ants scurrying to reinforce the mound's entrances against incoming water. Bees, highly sensitive to humidity in the air that could waterlog their delicate wings and prevent flight, would abruptly cancel their foraging missions and remain clustered close to the safety of the hive. On a still afternoon, the sudden silence of crickets ceasing their chirping or the unusual quiet of a typically noisy frog pond could signal a rapid pressure drop that these amphibians and insects felt deeply. Every animal, from the largest horse to the tiniest insect, was tuned into the rhythm of the atmosphere, and the farmer who paid attention could interpret this symphony of behavior to accurately predict what the day would bring. Beyond the animals in the skies, the very plants underfoot served as a meticulous, living almanac, offering silent predictions through their form and behavior. For a farmer attuned to these subtleties, a walk through the garden or a glance at the edge of a field could reveal as much about the coming weather as any modern forecast. This botanical wisdom was based on direct physiological responses to environmental changes, making it one of the most reliable tools in the farmer's predictive arsenal. Plants, in their quiet way, are deeply sensitive to shifts in humidity and atmospheric pressure, and they react in visible, measurable ways long before the first drop of rain falls. Take the humble morning glory, a common sight climbing fences and trellises. These vibrant flowers are famously punctual, opening their petals with the morning sun. But watch them on a day when the air grows heavy with moisture. You'll see them close up tightly well before the afternoon, even if the sky is still largely clear. This isn't a whim, it's a protective measure. The flower's petals are sensitive to humidity. As the moisture content in the air increases ahead of a rain shower, the petals react to prevent their delicate reproductive parts from being damaged by the incoming downpour. Similarly, the leaves of clover and wood sorrel often fold upward or droop noticeably. This movement, known as nyctinasty, is a response to the same increase in humidity, and it served as a clear, ground-level signal for farmers to finish their outdoor work and prepare for wet conditions. Perhaps the most ingenious natural hygrometer, however, is the pine cone. Its design is a marvel of natural engineering, perfectly adapted to seed dispersal in optimal conditions. The scales of a pine cone are responsive to moisture. In damp, humid air, these scales absorb water and swell shut, protecting the seeds inside from being released into unfavorable, soggy ground where they might rot. When the air is dry, the scales contract and open wide, ready to let the seeds loose to be carried on a dry breeze. A farmer could literally pick up a pine cone and assess its state. A tightly closed one was a sure sign that the recent humidity was not going away, while an open one promised a stretch of fair weather ahead. This simple observation was crucial for planning the harvest of grains or the cutting of hay, which required several consecutive dry days to cure properly. Even the aroma of the garden became a forecasting tool. You may have noticed on a humid summer afternoon that the scent of roses or honeysuckle seems particularly intense. This is more than just a pleasant phenomenon, it's a chemical reaction. The moisture in the air before a rain acts as a trap for scent molecules. In dry air, these fragrant oils from flowers evaporate and disperse quickly. But when humidity is high, the water vapor in the atmosphere captures these molecules and holds them closer to the ground, amplifying the fragrance and creating that unmistakable, sweet smell that whispers of approaching rain. This sensory clue, combined with the visual signals from the plants themselves, created a multi-layered forecast that informed a farmer's most critical decisions, from the simple act of carrying a cloak to the complex timing of the entire harvest season. But the observant farmer knew that the story of the weather was written not just in the sky or the fields, but in the very air they breathed, the wind itself. Wind direction and behavior served as one of the most immediate and crucial forecasting tools, a constant stream of data flowing across the landscape. In many temperate regions, a simple, reliable rule of thumb was deeply ingrained. Winds blowing from the east were often a harbinger of unpleasant weather, while those from the west typically ushered in clear skies and calm conditions. This wasn't a random superstition. It was a practical understanding of prevailing weather patterns. Weather systems in these latitudes generally move from west to east. A westerly wind, therefore, was pushing the fair weather of a high-pressure system along its natural path. An easterly wind, however, was doing the opposite. It was a sign that a low-pressure system was so powerful it was pulling air in from the east, fighting against the usual flow and signaling its disruptive arrival. To read this invisible messenger, farmers employed simple, ingenious methods. There was no need for a complex weather vane when the world itself provided indicators. A glance at the smoke rising from the homestead chimney was a daily ritual. In stable, calm weather, the smoke would rise in a thin, straight column directly upward. But if that same smoke began to swirl low to the ground or beat downward against the roof tiles, it was a clear signal that the pressure was dropping and the air was becoming unsettled. Similarly, the sound and movement of leaves in the trees offered a constant audio feed. A certain persistent rustling from a specific direction, or the way dust devils danced across a dry path, all contributed to the forecast. The strength and character of the wind were just as telling as its origin. A sudden, gusty wind that seemed to come out of nowhere, especially on a warm afternoon, could be the first tangible evidence of an approaching cold front. This gustiness is caused by the leading edge of the colder, denser air undercutting the warm air ahead of it, creating turbulent and powerful winds. This was a critical sign to secure anything that might blow away and to prepare for a rapid and often dramatic shift in temperature and conditions. The wisdom of this close observation was crystallized in sayings that have endured for centuries. The proverb, "When the wind is in the east, 'tis neither good for man nor beast," perfectly captures the universal experience of those raw, damp easterly winds that bring chilling rain and gloomy skies, making outdoor work miserable for everyone, livestock included. Another saying, "A veering wind will clear the sky," noted the importance of wind direction change. If the wind shifted clockwise, say from south to west, it often meant the worst of a storm was passing and clearer weather was on the way. This intimate knowledge of the wind's language allowed a farmer to feel a shift on their skin and know, with profound certainty, what the next hours would hold. And then there was the moon, a silent, celestial clock in the night sky that farmers watched with as much attention as they paid the sun. Its phases and appearance were not just markers of time. They were a critical part of the weather lore, a nightly bulletin on what the coming days might bring. A clear, starry night might seem peaceful, but if that darkness was pierced by a moon surrounded by a large, hazy ring, it was a cause for attention. That luminous halo, often beautiful to behold, is created by the refraction of the moon's light through millions of tiny ice crystals suspended high in the atmosphere within cirrus clouds. These very clouds are the leading edge of a warm front, and their arrival typically means precipitation, rain, or snow will follow within the next day or two. This sign was so reliable that seeing a lunar halo was as good as hearing a forecast for wet weather. The moon's phase itself was believed to set the tone for the entire period ahead. A common and deeply held belief was that the weather present at the exact time of the new moon would dictate the conditions for the next quarter of the lunar cycle. If the skies were clear and calm when the moon turned, one could expect several weeks of generally fair weather favorable for planting or harvesting. But if it was stormy or overcast at that pivotal moment, the forecast was for a prolonged period of unsettled, difficult conditions. This wasn't seen as a mere correlation. It was understood as the moon establishing the atmospheric rhythm that everything on Earth would follow. Even the color and clarity of the moon held meaning. A bright, sharp, silvery moon high in a crisp, black sky was a welcome sight, signaling high pressure and stable, dry air. A faint, pale moon, almost washed out and difficult to see, suggested high. Thin clouds were already beginning to veil the sky, a precursor to those thicker clouds that would eventually bring rain. A reddish or copper-colored moon, on the other hand, was often interpreted as a sign of wind. This hue is caused by the moon's light passing through a greater quantity of dust and particles in the lower atmosphere, which are often stirred up and held aloft by strong, turbulent winds. Perhaps the most dramatic and ominous sign was what was called the old moon in the new moon's arms. This occurs when the dark disk of the moon is faintly visible within the bright crescent of the new moon, illuminated by earth-shine sunlight reflecting off our own planet. While a stunning sight, this was widely regarded as a portent of coming storms, a glimpse of the past cycles, whether stubbornly holding on and disrupting the new. For a farmer planning the week's work, a glance at the moon provided a deep, complex forecast, blending astronomy, meteorology, and generations of hard-won experience into a single, silent observation. Of all the forecasting tools available to them, perhaps the most personal and profound was their own bodies. We've all heard the stories, maybe even joked about a grandparent who claimed they could feel a storm in their bones. But for generations of farmers, this was no joke. It was a reliable, daily source of meteorological data. They understood that physical sensations, particularly aches in joints or old injuries, were a direct response to the atmospheric environment. When a seasoned farmer woke up with a familiar throb in a knee or a stiff lower back, they didn't just dismiss it, they listened. That pain was a message, a biological alert system signaling a shift in the very pressure of the air around them. The science behind this is quite straightforward and validates this ancient wisdom. Our bodies are filled with cavities and tissues that are sensitive to changes in atmospheric, or barometric, pressure. When a low-pressure system, the kind that brings clouds, rain, and storms, moves into an area, the pressure outside our bodies drops. Inside our joints, however, the pressure remains the same. This creates an imbalance. To compensate, the soft tissues and fluid within our joints expand slightly to equalize the pressure differential. For most people, this expansion is imperceptible. But for someone with arthritis, past injuries, or even just the general wear and tear of a life spent performing hard manual labor, that tiny expansion is anything but subtle. The swelling tissues press against already sensitive nerves and inflamed areas, creating a distinct and often painful ache. For an elderly farmer, this physical intuition was as trusted as any other sign. Their bodies were living ledgers, a cumulative record of decades of toil, a broken wrist from a fall off a wagon 20 years prior, knees worn down from countless hours kneeling in the soil, a back strained from lifting heavy sacks of grain. These old wounds became their most sensitive instruments. A community would often look to its eldest members for their forecast. If old Joseph down the road was seen moving a bit more slowly, rubbing his shoulder with a knowing look at the sky, people took notice. His prediction wasn't based on a guess. It was rooted in the physical reality of the changing atmosphere. His discomfort was a powerful signal to his neighbors to perhaps bring the hay in a day early, to secure the shutters on the barn, or to prepare for a period of wet weather that would make the fields too soggy to work. This embodied knowledge created a unique and deeply respected role within farming communities. The elders' prediction was a vital piece of the communal safety net, a form of early warning system that protected the collective work and well-being of everyone. Their physical experience, earned through a lifetime of direct engagement with the land, was honored as a crucial form of intelligence. It stands as a powerful testament to a time when human beings saw themselves not as separate from nature, but as an integral part of its complex and ever-changing system, capable of feeling its rhythms from the inside out. Even the smallest creatures on the farm, the insects, offered some of the most precise and actionable weather data, their tiny bodies acting as hypersensitive instruments attuned to the slightest shifts in humidity, temperature, and air pressure. While a farmer might gaze at the grand spectacle of the sky for a long-range forecast, they would look down at the grass and the hedgerows for the immediate, short-term prediction, reading the frantic activity of the insect world like a daily bulletin. A whole branch of weather wisdom was dedicated to these minute forecasts, and some of it was so precise it could be measured with a pocket watch. Take the humble cricket, a creature whose summer song is one of the most familiar sounds of a warm evening. For generations, observant farmers noticed that the pace of a cricket's chirping wasn't random. It was directly tied to the temperature. The warmer the air, the faster the chemical reactions within the cricket's body, leading to a more rapid rate of chirping. This correlation was so reliable that it was codified into a simple, brilliant formula. By counting the number of chirps a snowy tree cricket made in a span of 14 seconds, and then adding the number 40 to that count, a person could accurately estimate the current air temperature in degrees Fahrenheit. This wasn't a vague old wives' tale. It was a practical, mathematical tool. A farmer resting on the porch after a long day could simply listen, count quietly, and know with surprising accuracy whether the night would be cool enough for a jacket or warm enough to enjoy the air. Other insect behaviors signaled changes in humidity, the precursor to rain. On a still, muggy afternoon, the behavior of flies and mosquitoes often becomes noticeably more aggressive. This isn't a figment of the imagination. It's a direct result of the changing air. These insects are acutely aware that rain would soon ground them, making it impossible to fly and feed. Sensing the rising humidity that precedes a storm, they go into a feeding frenzy, biting with a persistent urgency to get a final meal before the weather turns. Similarly, a sudden, dense swarm of gnats or midges dancing in a column of light isn't just an annoyance, it's a sign that the air is heavy with moisture, creating the perfect, still conditions for their aerial display and warning of the rain that will follow. Perhaps the most revered insect weather prophets, however, were the spiders. A farmer would pay close attention to the intricate webs woven in fence corners and between tall stalks of grain. The presence of a web, glistening with dew in the morning sunlight, was itself a sign of a past clear night, but the spider's construction habits were the real key. If a farmer saw a spider actively and diligently building a new web or repairing an old one, it was considered a very positive sign. Spiders are highly sensitive to vibrations and the slightest breeze. They will not invest the enormous energy required to spin a complex web if they sense unstable, windy conditions are imminent. Therefore, a spider busily at work was a strong indicator of continuing high pressure, stable air, and fair weather. Conversely, if spiders were seen abandoning their webs and seeking shelter deep in the cracks of a barn wall, it was a clear signal that their delicate senses had detected the falling pressure and increasing humidity that warned of an approaching storm, prompting them to retreat to safety. In this way, the smallest, most often overlooked residents of the farm became some of its most trusted forecasters. For those living near the coast or along a mighty river, water itself became a primary text to be read, a fluid and ever-changing forecast written in the behavior of lakes, wells, and the sea. The air's moisture content was a constant concern, and one of the simplest and most reliable gauges was found in the humble village well. On a clear day, the rope used to draw water would be dry and offer a firm, rough grip. But on mornings when the air was growing heavy with invisible moisture, a farmer would notice the hemp rope felt damp, even slippery to the touch. This was a direct physical reading of the humidity. The saturated air would condense on the cooler, porous fibers of the rope that had spent the night deep in the chilled earth of the well shaft. That slick, damp feeling was a tangible, early warning that the atmosphere was nearing its capacity, and rain was a strong possibility. It was a hyper-localized forecast, pulled directly from the ground. The sea offered a far more dramatic and powerful performance. Sailors and fishermen developed an entire language of listening, interpreting the sounds of the water long before any clouds appeared on the horizon. A calm ocean might whisper, but a troubled one would roar from a great distance. An unusual, low, roaring sound coming from the sea, even on a seemingly calm day, was taken as a grave warning. This phenomenon, now understood as the sound of waves breaking farther out at sea due to the incoming energy and shifting currents of a distant storm, was a crucial sign for coastal communities. It meant that, despite the local conditions, a powerful system was churning the ocean miles away and would soon arrive with potentially dangerous force. This auditory clue gave people precious time to pull their boats higher onto the shore and secure their homes against the coming gales. Even the behavior of smoke from a household fire was intrinsically linked to the water vapor in the air, acting as a visible indicator of atmospheric pressure. On a good, dry day, smoke from a chimney would rise in a clean, straight column, dissipating gracefully into the sky. This showed the air was light and could readily accept more moisture. But when smoke behaved oddly, clinging low to the ground, swirling lazily, or refusing to rise, it painted a very different picture. This happened because the air was already nearly saturated with water vapor. It was heavy and dense with humidity, creating a low-pressure environment that could not easily absorb the smoke's particulates. The smoke, with nowhere to go, would simply hang in the air, a thick, ominous haze that signaled the atmosphere was pregnant with rain, ready to release its burden at any moment. For a farmer looking homeward from a distant field, the sight of their own chimney's smoke lying flat over the roof was a definitive call to hurry back and prepare for a downpour. And perhaps most remarkably, modern meteorology has since confirmed that so many of these poetic proverbs and sayings were not just quaint superstition, they were rooted in genuine atmospheric physics. Take that famous rhyme many of us know: red sky at night, sailors delight; red sky in morning, sailors take warning. This enduring piece of wisdom is a perfect example of a weather forecast encoded in a simple couplet, and the science behind it is both elegant and solid. A sunset painted in brilliant hues of red and orange occurs when the sky to the west is clear. The sun's light has to travel through a much thicker slice of the atmosphere at the horizon, and this dense air, often rich with fine dust and other tiny particles, scatters the shorter blue wavelengths of light. This scattering allows the longer red wavelengths to pass through and dominate the sky's palette, creating that spectacular show. But more importantly, this clear western sky indicates that a high-pressure system, which brings stable, dry air and fair weather, is likely moving in from the west. Conversely, a vividly red morning sky tells the opposite story. It means that the high-pressure system and its clear air have already passed to the east, and the rising sun in the east is illuminating the underside of the approaching clouds from the next system moving in from the west, a system often laden with moisture and the promise of rain. Another profoundly accurate proverb is the warning about a ring around the moon, rain soon. That beautiful, sometimes eerie, luminous circle is not a ghostly portent. It is a textbook optical phenomenon called a 22-degree halo. It forms when the moon's light is refracted, or bent, as it passes through millions of perfectly shaped, six-sided ice crystals floating high in the atmosphere within thin, wispy cirrostratus clouds. These specific clouds are not random. They are the leading edge of a warm front, often arriving a solid 24 to 48 hours ahead of the main body of a storm system. The presence of these ice crystals aloft means the conditions are ripening for the clouds to gradually thicken and lower, eventually developing into the rain-bearing nimbostratus clouds that will deliver the promised precipitation. Seeing that ring was a direct, reliable forecast of wet weather on the horizon. Even the behavior of plants, which might seem like pure folklore, has a sound physiological basis. The saying, "when leaves show their undersides, be very sure that rain betides," is a direct observation of plant mechanics. The leaves of certain trees, like poplars and maples, are attached to their stems by delicate stalks called petioles. When humidity rises sharply before a rainstorm, the moisture in the air causes these stalks to soften and lose their rigidity. At the same time, the air pressure often drops, and winds can change direction. This combination of factors makes the lighter colored undersides of the leaves more likely to twist upward and become visible. The plant isn't prophesying. It is physically reacting to the exact same atmospheric changes that produce rain. This validation by modern science transforms these ancient sayings from mere folklore into a testament to human observation. For generations, without any formal training in physics, people patiently connected cause and effect, building a system of knowledge that was empirically tested and proven accurate through daily life. They were the first citizen scientists, and their legacy is a powerful reminder that careful observation of the natural world remains one of our most valuable tools. This incredible diversity of predictive wisdom underscores a fundamental truth about our ancestors' relationship with the weather. It was never one size fits all. A farmer in the damp, rolling hills of England might rely on the drooping behavior of oak leaves, but that same sign would mean absolutely nothing to a herder in the arid plains of sub-Saharan Africa. Weather lore was not a universal language. It was a collection of fiercely local dialects, each one painstakingly developed over centuries to answer the specific challenges of a unique environment. The knowledge was hyper-localized because it had to be. Survival depended on a forecast that was accurate for that particular valley, that specific coastline, that exact mountain range. This led to a stunningly diverse global library of forecasting knowledge, with each volume perfectly adapted to its surroundings. In the vast tropical regions, where life is governed by the relentless cycle of wet and dry seasons, predicting the arrival of the monsoon was a matter of existential importance. The entire agricultural year hinged on this event. Here, animal behavior provided the most critical data. In India, for instance, the early blossoming of the Cassia fistula tree, known as the golden shower tree, was a celebrated visual marker that the rains were nearing. But more intimately, people observed the ants. They would note when certain species began building their mounds higher, reinforcing the walls with a special waterproof saliva-clay mixture to protect their colonies from the coming deluge. The frantic, purposeful activity of an ant colony became a precise calendar. Similarly, the distinctive call of the Jacobin cuckoo, whose voice seems to cry out for rain, was awaited as a living herald of the monsoon's approach. These signs were worthless in a temperate climate, but in the tropics, they were vital news bulletins. Mountainous regions developed their own unique set of rules, written in the clouds that wreathe the peaks. For communities living in the valleys of the Alps, the Andes, or the Himalayas, a clear morning offered no guarantee of a clear day. Their first forecast of the day was always a long, studied look upward. The formation of a cap cloud, a stationary lens-shaped cloud that appeared to sit directly on top of a mountain peak like a hat, was an unmistakable warning of deteriorating weather. This cloud, known scientifically as a lenticular cloud, forms when stable, moist air is forced to flow over the mountain, cooling and condensing as it rises. The presence of this stationary cloud signaled that strong winds at high altitude were pushing a significant mass of moisture-laden air over the barrier, which would soon lead to precipitation and often fierce winds in the valleys below. Seeing that cap cloud meant it was time to bring the herds down from the high pastures and batten down the homestead. In stark contrast, desert cultures across the Middle East, North Africa, and Australia mastered the art of reading scarcity. Their survival depended on anticipating the rare, precious events of rain. They became exquisite readers of the night sky, interpreting the stars not for navigation alone, but for hints of humidity. A halo around the moon took on even greater significance here than in wetter climates. In the desert, such a sign was a potential promise of life-giving water. They also paid profound attention to the wind, knowing that a wind from a specific direction, say blowing off a distant body of water, might carry the faintest hint of moisture. The behavior of the few resilient desert animals was also a key indicator. The sudden, unexpected emergence of certain beetles or the hurried burrowing of desert rodents could signal a sensory detection of distant rainfall or a shift in atmospheric pressure that their human observers could not yet perceive. Every culture in every corner of the globe became a specialist in its own microclimate, writing the definitive book on its own weather, one painstaking observation at a time. Of course, this deep, localized wisdom was invaluable, but it was largely an oral tradition, passed from one generation to the next around the hearth or in the fields. For this vast body of knowledge to truly endure and reach a wider audience, it needed to be codified, written down, and shared. This is where one of the most iconic publications in American history enters our story, the Old Farmer's Almanac. First published in 1792 by Robert B. Thomas, this humble annual booklet became nothing less than the Bible of long-range weather forecasting for a burgeoning nation. It represented a monumental step, the formalization and commercialization of centuries of observed wisdom, packaged into a single, affordable guide that could be tucked into a pocket and carried out to the barn. Thomas's genius lay in his method, a sophisticated blend of the celestial and the terrestrial. He combined precise astronomical data, the phases of the moon, the positions of the planets, and the timing of solstices and equinoxes with the rich tapestry of traditional weather lore we've been exploring. His foundational belief, one shared by many cultures throughout history, was that the weather was not a chaotic force but a system governed by natural laws, and that the key to predicting it lay in understanding the intricate dance between the atmosphere and the cosmos. He developed a secret forecasting formula, a closely guarded secret that remains locked in a black box at the Almanac's offices to this day, though it is believed to heavily rely on solar activity, atmospheric pressure patterns, and yes, those phases of the moon. The Almanac's influence is almost impossible to overstate. For a farmer in the 1800s, it was an indispensable tool for planning the entire year. Its long-range predictions, printed month by month for the year ahead, dictated the rhythm of life. It provided the optimal planting dates based on the signs of the zodiac, advising which days were favorable for root crops, which for crops that bore fruit above ground, and which were best for weeding or harvesting. It contained tide tables for coastal communities, curing recipes for meats, advice on how to treat livestock ailments, and even snippets of poetry and humor. It was a farmer's calculator, calendar, weather station, and newspaper all bound together. Naturally, the accuracy of such long-range forecasts is a topic of lively debate in the age of supercomputers and Doppler radar. Modern meteorology, with its focus on complex fluid dynamics and real-time data, often scoffs at the idea of predicting specific weather patterns a full year in advance. The almanac itself claims an accuracy rate of around 80%, a figure that many scientists contend is impossible to achieve and difficult to verify objectively. Yet, to dismiss it based solely on this debate is to miss its profound historical significance. For generations, it was the most reliable source of information available. It provided a framework of expectation, a set of probabilities that allowed farmers to make calculated decisions in a world defined by uncertainty. It wasn't about guaranteeing sunshine on the 4th of July. It was about suggesting that the second week of June had historically been a good window for sowing corn, or that late October often brought the first frost. It was the culmination of collective wisdom, a printed echo of the thousands of voices that had spent centuries learning to listen to the earth, now available for the price of a few pennies. It stood as a testament to the human desire to find order in the chaos of nature, and for over 2 centuries, it has been a faithful, if occasionally flawed, companion to those who work the land. Yet for all the power of our modern forecasting, this shift to digital dependence has come at a profound cost. We have, in many ways, traded a deep and intuitive connection to our environment for the convenience of a notification on a screen. That ancient language of the wind, the clouds, and the aching in an elder's bones has largely fallen silent for the majority of us, becoming a forgotten dialect. We no longer need to watch the birds or smell the air. We simply check an app. This represents a significant loss, a severing of a fundamental human relationship with the natural world that was cultivated over millennia. We've outsourced our weather intuition to algorithms, and in doing so, we've become observers of forecasts rather than participants in the environment. But this ancient wisdom is far from extinct. In fact, it's experiencing a remarkable resurgence among communities who prioritize self-sufficiency and preparedness. Modern homesteaders, organic gardeners, and survivalists are actively reclaiming these skills, recognizing their immense value beyond mere nostalgia. For a gardener planting their seedlings, knowing the signs of a last spring frost by observing the budding of local trees is more immediate and personally verifiable than a broad regional forecast. For a family living off-grid, the behavior of their animals provides a constant, battery-free alert system for sudden weather changes. This knowledge empowers them, turning them back into active interpreters of their own landscape rather than passive consumers of data. Perhaps most importantly, this lore serves as a critical and fail-safe backup system when our technology inevitably stumbles. Satellites can be blinded by solar flares. Radar networks can be knocked out by severe storms or power outages, and cellular networks can fail precisely when we need information the most. In those moments of technological silence, the old ways become invaluable. Knowing how to read the thickening sky for a tornado, or understanding that a sudden drop in pressure signaled by a headache means seeking shelter, isn't just interesting, it can be life-saving. This wisdom is a form of resilience, a thread that connects us to a time when humanity's survival depended on its own wits and observation. Preserving this knowledge, then, is about more than just honoring tradition. It's about maintaining a vital library of human intelligence that remains deeply relevant. It encourages a mindful presence in our surroundings, a slowing down to truly see and listen to the world. It fosters a sense of responsibility and independence, reminding us that we are not separate from nature but a part of its intricate system. Learning to read the weather as our ancestors did is to reclaim a piece of that connection, to become fluent once more in a language that speaks of the Earth's rhythms, a skill that remains as practical and powerful today as it was centuries ago. Let's spend a day with a farmer from the 19th century, a man named Samuel, and watch as he becomes a living weather station. His day begins not with a glance at a screen, but with a long, slow look at the eastern horizon as the sun begins its ascent. The sky there is not a soft, pale blue, but a deep, fiery red that seems to bleed into the clouds. He remembers the old rhyme whispered to him by his father, and he knows that a red sky in the morning is a sailor's warning. It is the first clue, a subtle hint that the fair weather might be retreating. As he stands there, he feels a familiar, dull ache deep within his right knee, an old injury from a fall during last year's harvest. The pain is sharper than usual this morning, a persistent throb that tells him the pressure in the air is beginning to drop. His own body has delivered the second piece of the puzzle. Walking out to the barn to feed his livestock, he immediately notices the behavior of his cattle. They are not spread out across the pasture, peacefully grazing. Instead, they are gathered together in a tight, restless huddle, lowing softly amongst themselves. They sense the coming change in a way he cannot, their instinct driving them to seek the comfort and shelter of the herd. A quick glance at the large oak tree near the fence line confirms another sign. The leaves, usually showing their dark green tops, are now twisting on their stems, revealing their pale, silvery undersides. This happens when the wind shifts and the humidity rises, causing the delicate leaf stalks to soften and turn. The wind itself is still light, but it's coming from the east, a direction he knows seldom brings anything good. As the morning progresses into afternoon, the signs begin to multiply, each one adding certainty to his forecast. The air, which had been fresh and light, now feels thick and heavy to breathe, as if it were a damp blanket. It carries a distinct smell, that rich, sweet scent of rain amplified by the humidity trapping the scent of soil and blossoms close to the ground. The wind, once a gentle breeze, begins to pick up, gusting in a way that feels unsettled and unpredictable. It's still holding from the east, and now it starts to carry a distinct chill. He notices the profound silence that has fallen over the farm. The constant, rhythmic chirping of the crickets in the tall grass has ceased entirely. Their sudden quiet a stark warning that they can feel the approaching storm in their tiny bodies. The final, undeniable confirmation comes when he looks up at the sun. It is no longer a clear, brilliant disk. It is now surrounded by a vast, milky veil of high cloud, and around it is an immense, shimmering halo, a perfect ring of refracted light. He knows this sign well. A ring around the sun or moon means rain is coming, and soon, he has seen all he needs to see. He doesn't have a radar image showing a massive cell of red and yellow moving toward his farm, but in his mind, he can see it as clearly as if he did. He puts together the red dawn, his aching knee, the restless cattle, the upturned leaves, the heavy air, the easterly wind, the silent insects, and that luminous solar halo. Each sign on its own is just a suggestion, but together, they form an irrefutable conclusion. A severe thunderstorm is not a possibility. It is an inevitability, and it will be here by evening. This knowledge triggers a flurry of purposeful activity. He calls to his sons, and together they rush to bring in the last of the dry hay from the field, knowing a soaking rain would ruin it. They quickly secure the shutters on the farmhouse and barn. They herd all the animals into the sturdy shelter of the barn, ensuring the doors are fastened tight. They check the drainage ditches around the fields to make sure they are clear. Every action is calm and efficient, driven by the confidence of his prediction. And just as the sun begins to set, the sky turns an ominous greenish-gray. The wind begins to howl, and the first great drops of rain begin to fall, quickly turning into a torrential downpour. But Samuel and his farm are ready. His harvest is saved, his family is safe, and his animals are protected, all because he knew how to read the world around him. Beyond the immediate signs in the sky and the farmyard, farmers also look to a grander, more celestial timetable, the turning of the seasons marked by the calendar itself. This wasn't just a way to track the days, it was a sacred almanac of expectation, where specific dates were believed to hold prophetic power over the weather patterns for weeks or even months to come. Many of these long-range forecasts were tied to the feast days of saints, creating a unique blend of faith, folklore, and meteorology. Perhaps the most famous of these is the English proverb centered on Saint Swithin, a 9th-century bishop. The legend says that if it rains on Saint Swithin's day, the 15th of July, it will continue to rain for the next 40 days. Conversely, a dry day promises 40 days of fair weather. While modern meteorology would dismiss such a fixed rule, its persistence hints at a deeper truth. Mid-July often falls within a period when the jet stream's position becomes more settled over Western Europe. A rainy day might indeed indicate that the stream is situated in a way that favors more frequent low-pressure systems for a period, while a dry day suggests a stable high-pressure system has taken hold. The 40-day prediction was likely an exaggeration for effect, but the core observation that the weather pattern in midsummer often sets a trend shows how these sayings were often grounded in a kernel of cyclical truth observed over generations. This celestial guidance extended far beyond a single day, deeply influencing the most fundamental act of farming, planting. For centuries, agricultural practice was intimately guided by the phases of the moon, a practice known as lunar gardening or lunar agriculture. This was not seen as mere superstition, but as a practical application of cosmic rhythms. The belief was that just as the moon's gravitational pull governs the vast tides of the ocean, it also influences the much smaller tides of moisture in the soil and within the plants themselves. The waxing moon, growing from new to full, was associated with increasing light and upward energy. This period was considered ideal for planting crops that produce their yield above ground, things like lettuce, corn, tomatoes, and grains. The theory was that the increasing moonlight would encourage strong, upward leaf and stem growth. Conversely, the waning moon, diminishing from full to new, was linked to a time of drawing energy downward, into the roots. This was the preferred time to plant root vegetables like carrots, potatoes, onions, and beets. The belief was that the moon's receding influence would pull the plant's vitality deep into the earth, resulting in stronger, more robust root systems and a better harvest. This practice represents a beautiful synthesis of practical observation and a deeper cosmological worldview. It reflects an ancient belief in a connected universe, where the cycles of the heavens directly influence the rhythms of life on Earth. While scientific studies on lunar planting show mixed results, many gardeners today still swear by it, finding that this disciplined, rhythmic approach to gardening fosters a deeper attentiveness to their plants and the natural world, creating a mindful practice that transcends the mere act of sowing seeds. This fusion of the practical and the profound underscores a fundamental aspect of the farmer's relationship with the weather. It was never just about dry facts. It was about finding meaning and order in the often chaotic forces of nature. By attributing patterns to saints' days or the moon, they were creating a narrative, a story that made the immense and unpredictable power of the weather feel manageable and intelligible. It was a way of imposing a human sense of order on the natural world, of finding familiar signposts in the vast and mysterious journey of the year. This calendar-based wisdom provided a framework for hope and preparation, turning the anxiety of the unknown into the confidence of a plan, however symbolic it might have been. This poetic instinct for prediction found its perfect expression in the simple, memorable rhyme. These carefully crafted verses were far more than just charming bits of folklore. They were vital mnemonic devices, designed to be easily memorized and passed from a grandparent to a child, ensuring the survival of critical knowledge for the next generation. They condensed complex, atmospheric observations into a few catchy lines, transforming a sophisticated understanding of meteorology into something anyone could carry in their pocket. The rhyme mackerel sky, never long wet, never long dry is a perfect and beautiful example. It describes a specific cloud formation known as cirrocumulus, a high-altitude layer of small, white, puffy clouds that look remarkably like the scales on a mackerel fish. This mackerel sky appears when there is a certain amount of instability and moisture at high levels of the atmosphere. It is often associated with an approaching warm front. The genius of the rhyme is in its forecast. Never long wet, never long dry is a remarkably accurate description of the unsettled, changeable weather this cloud pattern signifies. It tells the observer that while rain is certainly on the way, it is unlikely to be a prolonged all-day downpour. Instead, you can expect a period of alternating sunshine and showers, a brief interlude of instability before the main weather system fully arrives. It is a short-range forecast encoded in a simple, rhythmic phrase. Another classic rhyme, when leaves show their undersides, be very sure rain betides, turns a simple walk through the woods into a precise meteorological tool. This saying is a direct observation of plant behavior in response to the physical forces that precede a storm. The leaves of many trees, such as poplars, maples, and oaks, are attached to their stems by slender, flexible stalks. Before a rainstorm, two key changes happen in the atmosphere. First, the humidity rises dramatically, causing these delicate stalks to absorb moisture and become softer and more pliable. Second, the winds often increase and shift direction as a low-pressure system moves in. The combination of these two factors, softer, more flexible stems and stronger, turbulent winds, causes the leaves to flip over, revealing their paler, lighter-colored undersides. The rhyme captures this cause and effect perfectly. The leaves aren't magically predicting rain. They are physically reacting to the exact same atmospheric conditions that produce it. Seeing an entire canopy of upturned leaves was a reliable, immediate signal that it was time to head indoors. The rhyme rainbow in the morning, shepherds take warning, provides a brilliant example of using time of day for forecasting. A rainbow can only form when sunlight interacts with moisture in the air, specifically when the sun is behind the observer and rain is in front of them. In the morning, the sun rises in the east. Therefore, to see a rainbow, an observer must be facing west, towards the retreating rain showers. Since weather systems in the temperate latitudes predominantly move from west to east, this means the rain that created the morning rainbow has already passed to the east, and the prevailing winds are likely bringing more unsettled weather in from the west right behind it. A morning rainbow is essentially a beacon, illuminating the path of the next incoming weather system. Conversely, an evening rainbow often suggests the rain has already passed and clearer skies are following behind it. These rhymes were not mere guesses. They were the result of countless generations of people watching the sky, noting the outcome, and then polishing that observation into a crystal-clear proverb that could stand the test of time. They are a testament to the human ability to find patterns, create meaning, and ensure that the wisdom of the past was never lost. For all their profound skill in reading nature's subtle cues, farmers were pragmatic people who welcomed any tool that could sharpen their predictions. Before the mid-1700s, their instrument kit was sparse, limited to perhaps a weather vane to gauge wind direction or a simple thermometer. But the invention that truly revolutionized their forecasting was the mercury barometer. This elegant glass tube, filled with mercury that rose and fell with the weight of the atmosphere, gave them something they had never had before: a number. It provided a quantitative, measurable confirmation of what their bones, their animals, and the sky had been telling them qualitatively for centuries. A sudden drop in the mercury level was an irrefutable, scientific signal that air pressure was falling, a classic indicator of an approaching low-pressure system and stormy weather. This allowed a farmer to move from a general sense of unease based on a red sunrise and aching joints to a confident declaration: "The glass is falling fast. We are in for a blow." The barometer quickly became the centerpiece of the farmhouse, often given a place of honor on a wall or mantelpiece. It was consulted with the same daily ritual as looking out the window. A farmer would tap the glass gently to ensure the mercury was moving freely, then note its precise height. Watching the trend was everything. A slow, steady decline might suggest a gradual worsening of conditions, giving ample time to prepare. But a rapid, dramatic plunge was an urgent alarm, a call to immediate action to secure everything before a severe storm arrived. This instrument became a bridge, a tangible link between the ancient, instinctual language of nature and the emerging world of scientific measurement. It validated their folk wisdom, proving that the signs they observed were not superstition, but had a direct, measurable physical cause. Alongside the barometer, the humble weather vane played a crucial role in providing immediate, localized wind data. Perched high on the barn roof, often crafted into the shape of a rooster or other farm animal, its directional pointer was constantly consulted. A farmer wouldn't just note that the wind was blowing. They would note that it had shifted from southwest to northeast, a critical detail that spoke volumes about which air mass was moving in. The thermometer added another layer, tracking the subtle shifts in temperature that accompanied different fronts. A sudden drop in the mercury of the thermometer, coupled with a falling barometer and a shifting wind, painted a complete and undeniable picture of a cold front's arrival. This integration of simple tools with deep observational knowledge marked a pivotal moment in history. It was the very beginning of the transition from weather lore to meteorology. Farmers were no longer just passive recipients of nature's signs. They were now active data collectors. They could correlate the behavior of their animals with a specific pressure reading, or confirm the meaning of a solar halo with a documented drop in the barometer. This fusion of old and new created the most accurate forecasting system the world had yet seen. A powerful combination of human intuition and mechanical precision that allowed them to face the uncertainties of the weather with greater confidence and control than ever before. Yet for all its profound wisdom, this art of prediction was never foolproof. Nature, in its immense complexity, always held the capacity for surprise, and even the most seasoned observers could be caught off guard. History is dotted with sobering tales of forecast failures, moments when the signs were misread or the weather defied all expectation, often with devastating consequences. One of the most infamous examples occurred in the autumn of 1846, when a combination of favorable signs, a late warm spell, specific animal behaviors, and a particular phase of the moon led many farmers across the American plains to predict a mild winter. Acting on this forecast, They felt secure in storing less hay and grain than usual, when an exceptionally brutal and early winter descended instead, burying the prairies in deep snow and locking the land in an iron grip of cold. The result was catastrophic. Livestock, with their feed supplies depleted, starved by the thousands. Families faced desperate scarcity, and the economic shockwaves reverberated for years. This was the harsh, unforgiving reality of a failed forecast. It wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a matter of survival. The core limitation of traditional weather lore, and the reason such tragic miscalculations could occur, lies in its fundamental nature as a short-range, localized forecasting system. It was exceptionally powerful for predicting conditions over the next 12 to 48 hours, finely tuned to the microclimate of a single valley or farm. It could tell you a storm was coming tonight, but it was far less reliable for predicting the overall character of an entire season. A long, harsh winter is the product of vast, continent-scale atmospheric patterns, shifts in the jet stream, oscillations in ocean temperatures thousands of miles away, forces that were simply invisible to even the most astute observer on their homestead. They could read the immediate symptoms with stunning accuracy, but diagnosing the larger, underlying climate condition was beyond the reach of their tools. Another critical weakness was the potential for observational bias. A farmer hoping for rain to nourish his young crops might, even subconsciously, give more weight to the signs that promised it. If the cattle were lying down and the leaves were turning, he might overlook a subtle wind shift or a barometer that wasn't falling as fast as it should. The human desire for a specific outcome could sometimes cloud the clear-eyed interpretation of contradictory evidence. Furthermore, these methods were not easily transferable. A proverb that worked flawlessly in the humidity of New England could be completely meaningless in the arid air of the Arizona Territory. As people migrated, they sometimes brought their weather lore with them, only to find it useless in a new environment with different patterns, leading to confusion and poor planning. It was these dramatic and costly failures that ultimately became the catalyst for a scientific revolution in weather prediction. The great famines and economic disasters born of erroneous forecasts created a powerful demand for something more reliable, something that could see beyond the horizon and understand the global forces at play. This pushed the development of the telegraph, which for the first time allowed for the near-instantaneous communication of weather conditions across vast distances. Suddenly, a drop in barometric pressure in Chicago could be warned to New York hours before the storm arrived. This network of data created the first synoptic weather maps, giving birth to the modern science of meteorology. The failure of the old ways didn't render them obsolete. Instead, it highlighted their limitations and forced humanity to build upon them, to add instruments, data, and physics to the foundational wisdom of observation. The aching bones and the turned leaves were joined by the isobar and the satellite image, creating a far more powerful and complete picture of the sky's intentions. Incredibly, the meticulous observations of generations past are now finding profound validation under the rigorous lens of modern science. What was once dismissed as folklore or superstition is increasingly being recognized as a form of precise, empirical knowledge. Take, for instance, the remarkable sensitivity of animals. For centuries, farmers knew that birds flying low or cattle acting restless meant rain was coming. We now understand this is because many creatures can detect infrasound, low-frequency sound waves produced by distant thunderstorms, ocean waves, and even earthquakes, which travel far beyond the range of human hearing. Sharks have been observed diving to deeper waters before a hurricane, and birds may alter their migration paths to avoid turbulent weather systems, all responding to these inaudible atmospheric vibrations that our ancestors could only witness through animal behavior. This scientific vindication extends into the realm of human physiology as well. That old saying about feeling a storm in one's bones is now a well-documented medical phenomenon. The connection between joint pain, particularly from arthritis, and drops in barometric pressure is established in numerous clinical studies. The Chinese letter is straightforward yet elegant. Our joints contain fluid and gases. When the external air pressure falls ahead of a weather system, it creates a pressure differential. The tissues and fluid within the joint expand slightly to equalize this difference, and this expansion presses on already sensitive nerves, causing the ache that so many have reported for generations. Our ancestors didn't have the terminology for barometric pressure, but they correctly identified the physical sensation as a reliable predictor, transforming their own bodies into living barometers. Perhaps the most visually striking confirmation comes from above. The satellite imagery and Doppler radar of modern meteorology often reveal the exact cloud formations and atmospheric patterns that were described in poetic rhymes centuries ago. That mackerel sky of cirrocumulus clouds, satellite photos show it forming at the leading edge of a warm front, exactly as the lore suggests. The anvil head of a cumulonimbus cloud, which signaled a violent thunderstorm to a farmer, is now a classic textbook image for severe weather development. Scientists can track the movement of these systems and confirm that the halo around the moon does, in fact, precede precipitation by roughly 24 to 48 hours, just as the old proverbs declared. This isn't coincidence. It's the result of countless people watching the same patterns repeat for generations and accurately recording the outcomes. This convergence of ancient wisdom and modern understanding reveals a powerful truth. Our ancestors were not merely superstitious. They were the first citizen scientists. They employed a meticulous, multi-generational process of observation, hypothesis, and verification. They collected data points through their senses, cross-referenced animal behavior with sky patterns and physical sensations, and passed their confirmed findings down through easily remembered rhymes. They developed a valid, localized science of the atmosphere long before the formal scientific method was codified. Their work was grounded in a deep, intimate connection to their environment, a continuous experiment where the success of a harvest and the survival of a community depended on the accuracy of their results. This validation by modern tools doesn't diminish their accomplishment. It elevates it, showing us that the most sophisticated technology sometimes simply confirms what the most attentive human observers already knew. Want to reconnect with that kind of intuitive forecasting? The beautiful thing is, you don't need a farm or a lifetime of experience to start. You can begin rediscovering this lost art right now, today, by simply stepping outside and learning to observe the world with a little more intention. Think of it as learning a new language, the language of the earth. And like any language, you start with the basics, with the most common words and phrases written across the sky and in the behavior of the life around you. Your daily forecast begins the moment you wake up. Make it a habit to look east at sunrise. What colors paint the horizon? A clear, pale yellow or soft orange sky often suggests a day of settled, pleasant weather. But if you see that deep, fiery red we discussed, take it as a gentle nudge, a heads up that the atmosphere might be a little unsettled, that you might want to carry an umbrella or reconsider that picnic for later. In the evening, do the same looking west. A brilliant red sunset is one of nature's most reliable promises for a beautiful day to follow. This daily ritual of checking the sky's mood at its edges costs you nothing but a moment of your time, yet it provides a constant stream of valuable data. Next, shift your gaze upward and start categorizing the clouds. You don't need to know all the scientific names immediately. Just start noticing their shapes and textures. Are they high, wispy, and feathery, like brush strokes on a blue canvas? Those are the cirrus clouds, the advanced scouts of a weather system, often signaling a change is due in a day or two. Are they puffy and white, floating like cotton balls? Those fair weather cumulus clouds usually mean all is well for now. But if you see those same puffy clouds start to stack up, growing taller and darker at their bases, transforming into the towering giants known as cumulonimbus, that's your signal to head indoors. That's the sky building a thunderstorm right before your eyes. Now, tune your ears to the sounds of your local wildlife. On your walk or during your morning coffee, listen to the birds. Are they singing happily and actively flitting from branch to branch? That's a good sign of stable conditions. But if you notice an unusual silence, or see swallows and swifts flying remarkably low, skimming the ground for insects, pay attention. They are responding to the same drop in air pressure that you might feel as a slight headache or a sense of lethargy. They're telling you the air is becoming heavy with moisture, that their insect prey has been pushed downward, and that rain is likely on its way. Watch the ants on the pavement. If they're moving with a frantic purpose, building up the walls of their nests, they're preparing for a deluge. The most powerful tool in this entire process is a simple notebook. Start a weather journal. It doesn't have to be fancy. Just make a note of the date, the time, and what you observe. Sketch the cloud types you see. Jot down the wind direction. Record the behavior of the animals in your yard. Note how the air feels. Is it damp and heavy or crisp and dry? Most importantly, come back later and record what the weather actually did. Did it rain 6 hours after you saw those cirrus clouds? Did a thunderstorm erupt an hour after the birds went silent? This practice of observation and verification is how generations of farmers built their wisdom. It transforms you from a passive recipient of a weather report into an active investigator, a citizen scientist in your own right. You'll start to see the patterns for yourself, and that moment of prediction, when you feel a shift in the wind and correctly foresee a coming change based on your own observations, is a deeply satisfying connection to a knowledge as old as humanity itself. This brings us to a pressing and profoundly modern question. In an era of rapid climate change, does this ancient, pattern-based wisdom still hold value? The answer is complex and incredibly revealing. As our global climate shifts, the historical weather patterns that shaped these proverbs over centuries are becoming less predictable. A red sky at night might not always guarantee a sailor's delight, if a heat dome or an erratic jet stream alters the typical west to east movement of weather systems. The timing of seasons is shifting. Frost dates are becoming less reliable, and animal behaviors are being disrupted by changes in habitat and temperature. The very foundation of this knowledge, the idea that the past is a perfect guide to the future, is being challenged like never before. Yet, paradoxically, this makes the core skill behind the lore more critical than ever. It's not about the specific signs themselves, but the methodology. The practice of hyper-local, continuous observation is becoming a vital tool for resilience. While satellite data provides a global view, it can sometimes miss the microclimates of a single valley or the specific conditions of a particular field. A farmer today might see a forecast for a 40% chance of rain, but by also noticing the specific, restless behavior of their own livestock and the unusual way the morning mist is clinging to the hills, they can make a more nuanced decision. It's the difference between a broad statistical probability and a ground truth confirmation. This fusion of technology and tradition is where the real power lies. Modern farmers are increasingly becoming data integrators, watching radar apps on their phones while also walking the fields, feeling the soil, and reading the biological barometers of the life around them. This adaptability is the true legacy of this ancestral knowledge. It was never meant to be a rigid, unchanging dogma. It was a flexible framework built on the principle of paying attention. In a changing climate, that skill is paramount. It allows for rapid, on-the-ground adaptation. A vintner might notice their grapes ripening 2 weeks earlier than the old almanac suggests due to warmer springs, and they can adjust their harvest schedule accordingly. A gardener might observe that the traditional last frost date is no longer safe and start their seedlings earlier. This isn't a rejection of the old ways. It's their highest application, using the discipline of observation to navigate a new reality. Ultimately, this ancient wisdom offers us something beyond mere prediction. It offers a philosophy of engagement. In a world of climate uncertainty, it teaches resilience. It encourages a mindset of working with the environment, of being an adaptive part of the system rather than trying to dominate it with brute force. It argues for building a deep, personal familiarity with one's own place in the world, to understand its new rhythms and its new signals. The proverbs themselves might need to be rewritten for the 21st century, but the practice of looking, listening, and learning from the natural world is now an urgent and essential skill, a crucial thread connecting us to the planet and helping us build a more resilient future upon it. This deep connection to the weather, forged through necessity and observation, did more than just help farmers plan their days. It seeped into the very bedrock of our culture, becoming a shared language that echoes through centuries of art, literature, and music. The predictions were practical, but the proverbs themselves became poetry, a way to make sense of the world's rhythms and pass that understanding down through generations. You can hear this legacy in the works of the greatest writers. William Shakespeare, a master observer of human nature, constantly used weather lore to set a scene or reveal a character's inner turmoil. In his tragedy Macbeth, the witches chant, "Fair is foul and foul is fair, hover through the fog and filthy air." This isn't just a creepy rhyme, it directly mirrors the real-world confusion of weather signs, where a beautiful red sky might foretell a terrible storm, blurring the lines between good and evil just as the prophecy blurs Macbeth's morality. Elsewhere in Venus and Adonis, he writes, "Like a red morn that ever yet betokened wreck to the seaman, tempest to the field," showing how deeply ingrained this specific piece of wisdom, the warning of a red sunrise, was in the Elizabethan consciousness. This cultural thread extends far beyond the stage into the very fabric of everyday life, especially in folk music. Countless traditional ballads and sea shanties are filled with references to the weather, because for sailors and farmers alike, their fate was literally written in the winds. The classic folk song, "The Farmer's Cursed Wife," features the line, "There came a terrible storm of wind and rain," a simple yet powerful acknowledgement of the weather's disruptive power. These songs weren't just entertainment, they were oral histories, preserving collective memory and a shared understanding of nature's power. The weather provided a universal metaphor in storytelling. A sudden storm could represent divine punishment, a cleansing change, or unforeseen tragedy. A long drought was a perfect narrative device for testing a community's resolve, a theme found in everything from ancient myths to the American classic, The Grapes of Wrath. At its heart, this vast cultural imprint points to a fundamentally different way of seeing our place in the world. For most of human history, people understood themselves as being intrinsically part of nature, not separate from it or trying to dominate it. The weather was not an abstract force reported by a distant news anchor. It was a personal, intimate dialogue between the land and the people who lived on it. Feeling a storm in your bones or seeing it in the behavior of ants was a constant reminder of this connection. This worldview fostered a sense of humility and respect. You couldn't control the weather, you could only listen to it, learn from it, and adapt. This relationship shaped traditions, from rain dances intended to participate in the natural cycle to festivals celebrating the harvest moon, acknowledging the celestial body that guided the planting and reaping of crops. This cultural legacy is what makes this ancient wisdom so poignant today. It's a fingerprint of the human experience, a record of how we once spoke the language of the earth and listened for its reply. These rhymes and sayings are more than forgotten superstition. They are a bridge to a time when our stories, our art, and our very identities were intertwined with the turning of the seasons and the mood of the sky. A profound reminder of a relationship built on attention and reverence. From the subtle ache in an elder's bones to the fiery palette of a sunset sky, our ancestors developed a profound and deeply effective language of weather prediction, a living dialogue with the natural world that sustained communities for countless generations. This was not a passive gathering of superstitions, but an active, rigorous science of attention, honed by necessity and polished by the invaluable currency of lived experience. They understood that every element of their environment, from the highest wisp of cloud to the lowest scurrying ant, was part of a vast, interconnected system, constantly broadcasting signals about what was to come. Their survival, their harvest, and their very way of life depended on learning to listen. In our modern era, we are blessed with an embarrassment of technological riches. We carry supercomputers in our pockets that can show us the path of a storm hundreds of miles away, predicted by complex algorithms analyzing immense datasets. This is a miraculous achievement, a testament to human ingenuity. Yet, in leaning so heavily on these digital oracles, we risk atrophying our own innate senses and severing that intimate, grounding connection to the world immediately around us. The ancient methods are not rendered obsolete by the new. Instead, they offer a crucial complementary wisdom. They remind us to look up from our screens, to step outside, and to engage directly with the wind, the wildlife, and the whispers of the changing air. They teach us observation, patience, and, most importantly, a posture of respect, the understanding that we are participants within nature's rhythms, not merely spectators or controllers of them. This knowledge is a heritage that belongs to all of us, a shared human legacy encoded in rhymes, stories, and the shared memories of our families. So the next time you step outside and feel a sudden chill, or notice the birds have fallen silent, or see a brilliant halo encircling the moon, you'll possess a new key to unlocking its meaning. You'll be part of a centuries-old conversation. We'd love to hear your part in that story. What is the most fascinating or curious weather sign you've ever encountered? Perhaps a peculiar saying from your grandparents or a unique observation from your own region. Share your own family's folklore and experiences in the comments below. Let's compile a modern almanac of lived wisdom together. And if you've enjoyed this journey into history's hidden mysteries, be sure to subscribe for more explorations into the forgotten knowledge that shapes